Howdy y'all and welcome. Hope everybody's doing well out there so far. Before we get into this July outlook, just a disclaimer here that weather outlooks are educated guesses, not guarantees. Even the Climate Prediction Center knows forecasts can change faster than a red coat inventory. This one is built on solid data, historical patterns, and expert analysis, but we still can't predict the future, so take it with a grain of salt, or heck, even the whole shaker. Stay prepared and remember that forecasts are helpful tools, not crystal balls. So here's the structure of what we'll be covering in this video. First, we'll take a look at the key factors like the INSO pattern and much more with a simple explanation. Then we'll take a look at all the long-range weather models, the temperature and precipitation anomalies. And then we'll take a look at the sea surface temperature patterns, which will lead into our hurricane outlook for July and a recap on June. And then we'll take a look at the Climate Prediction Center's expert guidance, and then provide my thoughts on a bold prediction of what we could expect, show you an analog year, which is 2015, and we'll break down how that year resembles how this upcoming month could be. And then we'll get into some July facts and even some revolutionary folklore as we are coming in on the 250th anniversary of America. And then we'll get into the agriculture outlook, a recap on June, and a preview on what July has in store. And then we'll wrap it up with a summary and some key takeaways. So, onto the key factors here. We got El Nino, which is going to be strengthening, which favors hotter temperatures across much of the country, especially the south, southeast, and the western part of the country. We got a Bermuda high and subtropical ridge, which pumps hot, humid air into the eastern and southern part of the country. 3, we got western ridging and large-scale circulation, which increases the likelihood of hotter and drier conditions across the western and central part of the country, which is, you can see here, we got an omega blocking pattern, which we'll get into what that means here in a little bit. Basically, it means we're going to be dealing with some very, very hot air potentially. Number 4, we got warm Atlantic, Gulf, and sea surface temperatures, which adds extra moisture and energy, boosting humidity and thunderstorm potential in the south and east. Soil moisture conditions can be drier than normal in parts of the northern and western plains and corn belt, which can amplify heat and amplify this omega blocking pattern, by the way. North American monsoon season, which we're going to be coming in here in July. Seasonal wind shift that peaks in July and brings beneficial rain and thunderstorms to the southwest. So we are heading into monsoon season down there. And last but certainly not least, we got the MJO, which is currently weak, but can create periods of enhanced or suppressed storm activity for at least 1 to 2 weeks. So I know that some of these key factors definitely counteract each other, especially the MJO and Gulf moisture and even I would say the monsoon season as well. But we'll still take a look at the anomalies and provide expert guidance here in a little bit. So on to the models here. Take a look at all the long-range models, which includes the GEFS, Euro Weeklies, CSV2 Extended, and CMC Extended. These are all of the weekly models we'll be taking a look at. And then we got the Euro Seasonal, which honestly shows us a warmer bias when it comes to temperatures. CSV2 and CanSIP Seasonal, which the CanSIP Seasonal shows us pretty much what the Climate Prediction Center shows us in a nutshell. And of course, these 3 models are all of the monthly models. We're going to start off taking a look at the GEFS, and we can see as we enter July, it's looking like the western part of the country is going to be starting off on a cold note, while the rest of the country is going to be very, very hot. Head off into the middle of the month, we can see that look like much of the country is going to be heading into above average temperatures unless you live up here in the Northeast, Great Lakes, and Ohio Valley, and some of the Mid-South as well. Head off into the end of the month, much of the same story, but overall, I would say much of the country is heading into an above average temperature pattern. What about the Euro Weeklies? Now, this model don't have a warm bias, so don't worry there, but we'll still take a look at the Euro Seasonal too. Now, the Euro Weeklies and GEFS are definitely both in agreement with each other, as they're showing that the western part of the country is going to be leaning well below average, while the rest of the country is going to be leaning well above average unless you live down here by Florida. Head off into the middle of the month, much of the same story here really, except more of the country is coming in on above average temperatures, and really honestly, it's like much of the country is going to be well above average unless you live up here in the Northeast. Head off into the end of the month, looking like that omega pattern is going to be playing a role. And what is that really? Well, we'll break down the definition here in a little bit, but we can see got that omega blocking pattern, which is basically western US ridging and large scale circulation, which increases the likelihood of hotter and drier conditions across the western and central US. And we do got that going on right here. And to show y'all real quickly what I mean, take a look at the troughing and ridging patterns. We can see, of course, the beginning beginning of the month, they're showing us that there's going to be a big trough out west, big ridge out east, which brings cooler conditions out west, hotter conditions out east, but expect this to change as we head into the middle of the month. As you can see, we're going to be in a major ridging pattern for much of the country, which could lead to a big heat dome and what's called an omega blocking pattern, which could mean drastically hot temperatures for much of the country, which is shown here. But of course, we'll break down the definition of it here in a little bit. Now on to the CSV2. Please keep in mind this model differs from the rest of them. I went ahead and took a look at all of them before doing this video, and this model may surprise y'all, and I'm actually in disagreement with this, surprisingly, as the CSV2 is my favorite model. But we can see all the models are in agreement with each other at the beginning of the month, which is pretty typical. Usually the further we head out, the more uncertainties. Why I put the disclaimer at the beginning of the video that anything every week out, it's virtually impossible to forecast, but we still take a look at anyways because this is an outlook video and it's only an educated guess. But we can see, of course, the beginning of the month, cool out west, hot out east. And we can see this is why I'm in disagreement with this compared to the rest of the models, because it definitely differs. Now, usually I like a model that differs, but we refer back to the key factors here. We can see we got El Nino, which is strengthening, which usually means much of the country is going to be above average. There could be caveats, by the way. Mother Nature loves to throw us curveballs. We have a western ridging and large-scale circulation, which leads to an omega blocking pattern, which means that much of the country could be hotter than normal. And we got this Bermuda high, which pumps hot, humid air into the eastern and southern part of the country. That's why I'm in disagreement with this, although there could be caveats, so keep that in mind. But I am in disagreement with this, surprisingly. And you can even see that some of the western part of the country is coming in on below average temperatures as well. So honestly, I would be in disagreement with this, but you never know. This could possibly happen as well. Now onto the CMC model. This is my least favorite model, to be honest, but we still take a look at it anyways. We can see all the models are definitely in agreement. So it's looking like the beginning of the month will be cool out west, hot here in the central and eastern part of the country, but head off into the middle of the month. Really looking like all the models are in agreement with each other except for the CSV2. So I would say cool out west, hot out east to start off July, but as we head into the middle and end of July, I'm thinking that much of the country is going to be heading into a hotter than normal pattern. Really, unless you live down here in the southwest, as we are heading into monsoon season. So that's my thoughts on what we could expect. Of course, we'll get into the expert analysis here in a little bit. Now on to the monthly models here. We can see the Euro seasonal, which typically shows us a warmer bias, and it's showing us that here. Much of the country's heading into a warmer than normal trend, unless you live down here in the southwest and parts of the southeast. CSV2 seasonal, definitely in disagreement with this, but you never know. Mother Nature loves to throw us some curveballs in there, showing us that much of the country is leaning below average, surprisingly, although the western part of the country is leaning above average. CANSIP's model, typically in alignment with what the Climate Prediction Center has to show us, although they're showing us much below average temperatures here in the central part of the country with above average out west. And a mixed bag here in the East Coast, as we're having above average temperatures here in the Northeast. So again, I would be in disagreement with this too. So what do the experts have to show us here? Well, much of the country's heading into above average temperatures, which is expected. Equal chances means either above or below average, as some models have been showing cooler than normal temperatures here in the central part of the country, while other models, and really majority of the models, are showing us above average temperatures here in this region here. And even though if it says below average, you can still come in on some very hot temperatures, but really cooler than what it would normally be. Let's say it's 80 degrees and usually the normal high is 90 or something like that. That could still be classified as below average. So we could be dealing with either below or above average here in the central part of the country, but I would bet my horse on it being above average for much of the country, as we are heading into what I call an omega blocking pattern, which increases the likelihood of hotter and drier conditions across the country. So definitely prepare for that. Now on to the precipitation here, what we could expect. We stick with GEFS. It's showing us that the northwest into the northeast is leaning above average, while the southern half of the country is leaning below average. Head off into the middle of the month, right around the 15th time frame, we can see that the southeast leaning above average, unless you live down here by Florida, below average here in the northern plains into the Midwest, and above average here in the northeast northeast and above average here in the southwest. Heading to the end of the month, well above average here in the southeast and northeast, well below average here in the central part of the country into the midwest, and leaning above average here in the southwest. Now, what about the Euro weeklies? Well, showing a similar picture here as it's showing the northwest into the northeast being above average, although it's a mixed bag here in the northeast. Below average here in the southern half of the country into the southeast though. Head off into the middle of the month. Looks like more of the country is heading to below average precipitation. So the Euro weeklies and the GEFS differ slightly here. So we head into the middle of the month, although heading towards the end of the month, of course, more of the whites on the map means more to be determined, but leaning above average here in the southwest, but leaning towards a drier pattern here in the much of the western part of the country. Central part of the country is going to be below average at the end of the month, and East Coast, Northeast, Mid-Atlantic going to be above average according to the Euro Week CSV2 model. Well, they're showing a similar picture as well. So the beginning of the month is looking to be cool and wet out west, and here in the northeast could be hot and wet, and here in the central part of the country as well, hot and wet there. Southern half of the country is looking to be pretty dry to start off July. Head off into the middle of the month, roughly the 18th time frame. Western part of the country is still going to be above average, while the northeast sort of a mixed bag. Southeast leaning above average as well. So according to the CSV2, it's looking like much of the country is honestly leaning into an above average pattern, except for the south central part of the country. Head off into the end of the month, much of the same story there, although the south central part of the country is going to be leaning below average. Now onto the CMC extended. This is my least favorite model, but we'll still take a look at it anyways. Similar story here at the beginning of the month with above average precipitation from the northwest down here into the midwest, into the northeast. Below average here in the southern half of the country though. Head off into the middle of the month. Southwest is coming in on well above average precipitation all the way up here into the Rockies as well. More of the eastern part of the country is going to be below average though, so definitely some relief when it comes to the precipitation anyway. July is typically drier than normal anyways, so this is pretty typical and really a relief from what we came in on here in June, as we came in on a lot of precipitation. I remember we had this big storm back on, I think it was June 17th. We had a 20-inch-per-hour rainfall rate, and we got over 5 inches of rain that day, so definitely could use a break from the rain here in the Ohio Valley. But of course, further we head out, the more whites on the map, more uncertainties. And this is why we always put the disclaimer at the beginning of the video to please take this with a grain of salt, because the further we head out, the more uncertainties there are, of course. But basically, I'm thinking the beginning of the month is going to be soggy from the northwest into the midwest, although some parts of the midwest could be dry, but I'm thinking from the northwest into the northeast, going to be relatively soggy. Could be dealing with some severe weather as well as we transition from cool air out west and hot air out east to some potential cool air here in the Ohio Valley. I know some models have been showing that, so there could be some more severe weather here out by Illinois, Iowa, and Wisconsin, which y'all do need the break here in Illinois as y'all have broke a record when it comes to tornadoes. So you may come in on that here in the middle of the month as we are coming in on some drying conditions potentially, if we stick with this model anyway. But overall, I think the month of July is going to be leaning below average for much of us. Because as we take a look at the Euro seasonal for the month of July, we can see much of the country is heading into below average precipitation unless you live down here in parts of Alabama and Georgia and a little bit of the northwest as well. And you can see even the southwest is going to be pretty dry, which is pretty shocking as we are heading into monsoon season. Now, I think monsoon season is going to be a little late this month, but still going to happen. Probably why they're showing below average down here in the southwest. CSV2. Different story here. Much of the western part of the country is heading into above average precipitation. Southwest is a mixed bag, but I would expect it to be leaning above average down there. Southeast is going to be dry, but the rest of the country is going to be leaning above average if we stick with the CSV2 anyway. Concept seasonal from Idaho all the way down here in the southeast is going to be above average. Northeast and west coast and northern plains leaning below average. Wisconsin, parts of the Great Lakes coming in on above average. So all the models are sort of in disagreement with one another, which, yeah, I would say that's true because I'm thinking July is overall going to be pretty dry. So I would probably, if I'm honest here, be in agreement with the Euro seasonal, although I'm thinking the Southwest could be heading into above average territory as we are heading into monsoon season, although I think monsoon season is going to be arriving a little late here this month. The reason why I'm saying that, other than July is typically drier overall anyways, is because we're going to be coming in on a weak MJO, which can create periods of enhanced or suppressed storm chances for about a couple weeks. So the MJO is going to be picking up. We have drier than normal soil moisture across much of the country. Could lean below average, but also could lean above average as well, as we are coming in on warmer than normal sea surface temperatures here in the Atlantic and Gulf, which we'll get into here in a little bit as well. And we have hot, humid air, which leads to a lot of moisture as well. So that's why I'm saying really it's to be determined as far as precipitation goes across much of the country. But we refer back to the expert guidance here at the Climate Prediction Center, and they're showing us that the Ohio Valley is leaning above average while the Southwest is leaning above average. I would be in agreement with this. The Gulf Coast here is going to be leaning below average, while the Northern Plains is going to be leaning below average as well. There is a lot of equal chances on the map, which means above or below average. So definitely going to be sticking with the Climate Prediction Center here, as I'm thinking it's going to be a wild guess here as far as precipitation goes, but pretty certain as to what we could expect as far as temperatures goes. I'm thinking much of the country is going to be heading into well above average temperatures, especially here out west, since we're going to be coming into what's called an omega blocking pattern, which usually means hotter conditions out west and here in the central part of the country as well. And that could stretch its way here into the eastern part of the country. So before we get into the bold prediction, let's go ahead and get into the hurricane outlook for the month of July and give you a recap into what happened in June. I want to simplify it here. I'm going to show you one model run and take a look at both basins, the Atlantic Basin and the Eastern and Central Pacific basins. We can see for the month of July, going to be leaning above average, which we saw on the key factors. So going to be leading to a lot of moisture here in the south, although there could be some limiting factors playing a role in our precipitation suppression here in the Gulf Coast and East Coast as well, which was really shown on all of the models, as all the models were differing from one another, which is just honestly not too surprising. We take a look here at the Eastern Pacific, definitely going to be above average out there. Central Pacific out there by Hawaii, much above average out there too. Now it takes more than just sea surface temperatures to play a role in our hurricane activity for the month of July. If y'all watched my hurricane outlook video, y'all saw that we are going to be coming in on a below average hurricane season here in the Atlantic Basin, while the Pacific Basin is going to be coming in on an above average hurricane season due to these El Nino conditions, which usually leads to more wind shear here in the Atlantic, even though we have above average sea surface temperature. Now, bold prediction for the month of July, we're expecting about 2 to 4 named storms in the Atlantic Basin, while we have about 5 to 8 in the Eastern Pacific due to favorable conditions, obviously. July typically sees increasing activity in both basins, with the Pacific expected to remain more active than the Atlantic. So monitor the Gulf and Caribbean closely for any early season systems that could impact the U.S., like we had with our first named storm this season that formed in the Gulf and brought impacts to part of the northern Gulf Coast. We also had several tropical systems that developed in the Eastern Pacific Basin during June, though impacts on Hawaii were definitely limited or minimal, which was very good news. Overall activity was near or slightly below average for the month across both basins, so that's some very, very good news for y'all out there in Hawaii and any of the hurricane prone areas. So regardless above or below average, make sure you have your guard up here this hurricane season. So on to my bold prediction of what we could expect. This July will bring widespread above average heat across much of the country, with the highest risk of extreme heat in the south, southeast, and west, driven by a strengthening El Nino and persistent omega block pattern. Now, what is an omega blocking pattern? The definition of it down here basically means that it is a large, persistent, high-pressure system that can trap hot air in place for weeks, often causing prolonged heat waves. Now, referring back to the models here to show y'all clearly what an omega blocking pattern means and hit this home for y'all. If y'all are still confused, sure you leave a comment down in the comment section down below. Happy to respond to y'all down there. Basically, when referring to an omega blocking pattern, you just got to think of it like this. Now, we have two patterns. We have a ridging pattern and we have a troughing pattern, right? We have a ridge here in the orange, which basically brings hotter and drier conditions with it in most cases. And we have a trough, which usually brings cooler and wetter conditions in most cases as well. Push us forward, of course, we can see this more prominently here. We have a trough out west and a ridge out east. And of course, it's going to change as we head into the latter half of July. As you can see, we're going to be having what's called an omega blocking pattern, which usually means that we're going to have hot air trapped in place for weeks and weeks on end. And we usually have this in July, and it's looking like we're going to have this here as well this July in the central and western part of the country. Now, keep in mind, this usually only takes place here in the western part of the country, but can also shift eastward and bring hot air here out east as well. So that's all you got to think about when it comes to omega blocking patterns. If you ever see that word in a video or hear a weatherman say omega block, or if you ever see it on a news site or any sort of fake news website, anything like that, that's all you got to think about. Basically, it's a big old heat dome. It brings hot air and traps hot air in one place weeks and weeks on end. So hopefully I didn't confuse y'all. If it did, please make sure you leave some feedback in the comment section down below. I'd be happy to respond to you. But did you know in 1787, referring back to this image here of Ben Franklin signing these paper shillings, that Ben Franklin helped design early American currency featuring the motto, "Mind your business," these coins over here, just as founders prepared for independence. We too must prepare for the impacts of a hotter July, because we are definitely going to be coming in on that here this July. Which, what else is new? July is typically hot anyways, but we are going to be coming in on a major heat wave here this month. Now moving on to an analog year, 2015. Why is 2015 similar? Well, both had a strong El Nino with persistent omega blocking patterns, which resulted in widespread above average heat during July. Very similar conditions are expected this year. And again, an omega block pattern is a large, persistent, high pressure system that can trap hot air in place for extended periods, often causing prolonged heat waves. And we could definitely be coming in on that here this month, which, what else is new? It's July. It's always hot in July. Now on to some facts and some revolutionary folklore. Did you know that the dog days of summer were named after the star Sirius and were believed to bring the hottest and most dangerous weather of the year? In colonial America, extreme July heat was sometimes viewed as a bad omen or a sign of hardship ahead. July lightning was viewed with suspension in early American folklore, with some believing it carried spiritual or ominous meaning. Heat waves in July were historically linked to increased illness, leading to an old belief in summer fevers. So there's some interesting facts and folklore, either new or maybe even not new. Now on to some revolutionary folklore. Did you know that brutal July heat in 1776 made the signing of the Declaration of Independence physically grueling for the delegates? Heat and drought during the Revolutionary War often disrupt troop movements and supplies more than enemy fire. Soldiers nicknamed extreme summer heat the fiery furnace, a term still used in some regions today. July was one of the deadliest months for Continental Army soldiers due to heat exhaustion and disease. So there's some interesting facts and folklore, either new, maybe even not new, and a tie-in to the Revolutionary War as we are celebrating 250 years of America's greatness. So definitely get out there and celebrate here in July. And if you stayed this far in the video, I'd like to thank you all. As a thank you, here is an agricultural recap and preview for the month of July. July is expected to bring continued crop growth with some heat and storm challenges. Above normal temperatures are expected across much of the country due to an omega blocking pattern stated earlier. Heat may stress crops in the plains and southwest though, although we are coming in on what's called monsoon season. Expecting monsoon season to hit a little late this July, but it will still hit this year, so be aware of that. Scattered thunderstorms likely in the Midwest and Southeast, bringing needed rain, but also potential for isolated flooding. Moisture outlook varies. Drier in the west, wetter in parts of the east. Monitor irrigation needs closely. Continued crop growth expected though. Focus on pest management and protecting yield potential. And as we take a look back at June was a fantastic growth month across much of the country. Warm temperatures and frequent rainfall boosted crop development across much of the Midwest, Southeast, and Plain. Abundant soil moisture supported strong growth in corn, soybeans, and cotton. Hay harvests and planting operations progressed well in most regions. Pasture conditions improved significantly, supporting livestock and grazing. So thank you to all the farmers out there who work tirelessly to feed this great nation. You are definitely appreciated. So what you have to take away from this video is basically 2015 is a strong analog year due to a similar El Nino and high pressure patterns that brought widespread heat. Above average temperatures are expected with highest extreme heat risk in the south, southeast, and west. Persistent omega block and high pressure patterns may cause prolonged hot stretches. So preparation and awareness are key during peak summer heat. So basically all you got to take away from this is it's going to be hot for the month of July pretty much. So I hope each and every one of y'all enjoyed this July outlook. If you did, please make sure you hit that like and share button so more folks are informed about the weather. Also leave me some feedback in the comment section down below, as any feedback helps provide you the viewer better and more informative content in the future. Also, if you haven't done so already, please hit that subscribe button down below, as at Here Wins Weather we try to make weather forecasting fun and informative. So basically it's going to be a hot July and dry for most, and could be soggy for others, but I'm thinking overall it's going to be hot and dry for much of the country. So enjoy the month, y'all. It is America's 250th birthday here in July, so get out there and celebrate America's greatness. And don't forget why we celebrate this great country is because of our forefathers who fought for the freedoms we take for granted each and every day. So again, like, comment, subscribe. Appreciate all of y'all for watching, and until next time, never stop forecasting.